Hi, Hope. Welcome to Multispective. I'm so excited to have you here with us.
I'm excited to be here. I am really thrilled to have this opportunity to share with you.
Yeah. You do have quite an interesting story, and I feel like there are little bits and pieces that kind of center around your name. Curious, is your name self-picked or was this given to you by birth?
No, this is part. I actually have quite a long name. My birth name that I was christened with is Christiane Frances Hope Costin.
Ah,
That was my maiden name. And Hope was actually a family name that got passed down from the as a last name. The fellow who discovered the Hope diamond, he was one of my relatives. So that's where the Hope comes from in my name. But I have
wow.
really clung to that name. It
Yeah.
really means a lot to me that I'm named Hope. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And we'll get more into your story a little bit. And I'm sure there's like a lot of connections to that and sort of like your name. I feel like a name is such an important part of a person. It's like your own personal identity, right? And
Yes.
it's the word that you probably use quite a lot in your day-to-day life. So, putting those words into your daily kind of routine is quite powerful as well, I would say. But yeah, Hope, why don't you tell us a little bit about where are you from and where does your story sort of begin?
Well, let's see, where am I from? I'm initially or originally from New England. I was born in Connecticut and lived in Connecticut for the first 8 years of my life. And then my parents had a job change and moved down to Maryland. I'm in the US. We lived in Maryland from the time I was 8 until I was around 16. And then I went away to a girls' boarding school in England for a year because I had graduated from school a year early. I had skipped a grade. So when I came back to the States, my parents had moved to Vermont, another New England state. And
Mm.
I basically, I spent time in Vermont, but most of those years after I got back from England were college years. I went to college outside Boston and kind of stayed in the Boston area, got sober, which is a big part of my story, in the Boston area when I was 20. Went to graduate school in Connecticut and then came back to New Jersey, where I had my first teaching job in Princeton, New Jersey. And I met my second, because I had been married previously, my second husband in Princeton. And we lived there for 15 years. And then we relocated to Michigan for about 6 years. And now, for the past 16 years, we've lived down here in North Carolina.
Wow. So you've really been around the States. I mean, like all around. What has it been like for you? I mean, as a young person sort of moving around, would you say that that was kind of like a more of a positive like experience you look back on it, or would you say you kind of wished you'd been put for your younger years?
I wish we'd stayed in New England. I mean, you look at your life and you think you wouldn't be the person you are today if everything that happened to you hadn't happened. So
Right.
there's that perspective that's like, okay, everything is as it should be. And it all turned
Mm.
out very well. But, I love New England, and we just had snow here yesterday in North Carolina, which was wonderful because I miss the snow. We get seasons here in North Carolina. We have spring, summer, winter, fall, and winter.
Mm.
But we've been lacking in snow over the years, and to have snow yesterday was such a treat right around this holiday season. So yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of miss New England and the mountains and the snow and the skiing and that the ice skating
Mm.
outside and doing all that.
Yeah, that's really nice. So what was it? You mentioned that the first time when you guys moved was because of your parents' work, right?
Yes, my father was an Episcopal priest, and when I grew up at Kent School, which was an Episcopal boys' school in Kent, Connecticut. And then in 1963, maybe right around then, my father became the headmaster of a private girls' school outside Baltimore, Maryland, which was an Episcopal girls' school. And we lived there for a number of years.
Yeah. Would you say like growing up, I don't know, part and parcel, possibly because you were traveling around and moving around a fair bit growing up. Would you say that that affected you socially in any ways, or would you say that you were quite a social individual?
I'm a pretty private person, and I think because of having the diseases of both alcoholism and bipolar disorder, I'm fairly introverted, and I'm not somebody who feels comfortable necessarily in social situations. So the fact that we moved around and didn't really lay down very firm roots, I think it contributed to my sense of isolation that I felt anyway because of having those diseases.
Hmm.
Even in recovery, which I've been in for 43 years now, I've been sober and recovering from, bipolar disorder since 1998. I still prefer being either in very small groups or one on one. I don't like social situations very much. I don't feel particularly comfortable in big groups of people.
Hmm. So, can you like tell me a little bit about what bipolar looked like for you? Because I know it can be quite different for different people, the experience.
Yeah, I was just rereading my memoir that I wrote. I'll hold it up here. It's called How to Remodel a Life. And the subtitle for it is A Guide to Living Well with Alcoholism and Bipolar Disorder. And as I was rereading it, because I'm about to make it into an Audible book next week, I'm recording it, I was impressed with how much I talk about my bipolar disorder in that book. I hadn't realized I had done that quite so much. And I believe that I was born with bipolar disorder. I believe that a lot of the behavior I exhibited in my early years was because of that disease. I believe that the reason I became an alcoholic and got involved with, alcohol and drugs was in part and parcel because of my bipolar disorder. I tend to be someone in my teens more I want to say I was more on the depressive side, but I really wasn't. I was this very, very, not black and white, but like having two personalities. I was this, on the one hand, very, very caring, loving, productive, dynamic person who did things like orchestrated an entire creative arts festival for our school all by myself. I got all these musicians and artists and chefs and dancers and actors and everything all involved in this celebration. And I basically did it single handedly. But there was also the other side of me that was very, very depressive and suicidal. I had in my teens multiple suicide attempts. Couldn't stand the sight of myself in the mirror. Would cover mirrors up when my family was gone and just really loathed myself in a very big, deep, dark way. So there were those two extremes of my personality that were going on throughout my early teens and into my 20s. And that to me was my bipolarism at work. So
I do want to ask, like, for individuals that may not know, how would you be able to differentiate bipolar disorder with someone who just is very just emotional, who generally feels a lot of emotion? Like, being diagnosed could this be dangerous to an individual's life? And was it ever for you?
there are, at least for me, there are certain telltale symptoms that I have when I know I'm becoming either manic or depressed. When I'm becoming manic, what happens for me, it starts out kind of nice and it's a warm, fuzzy feeling like I'm becoming more productive. I have more energy. I have more joy of living. And that's a good thing. That's a nice place to be. We like to feel that way. But with someone who has mania, that quickly becomes, for me anyway, it feels like I'm in a carriage and the horses are running away with the carriage. The momentum, the, you know, suddenly I'm not sleeping at night. I'm producing. I'm up at night writing writing emails, writing novels, writing letters, doing art, but not sleeping. So my sleeping goes down the hill, goes away. My eating changes. I don't eat as much as I should be eating. I become very, very sexual. I want to have sex with everybody that I see, basically. I become overblown. My sense of reality becomes very twisted. Like, I remember when I had that manic episode, I played tennis with somebody and I really believed that I was Chris Evert. I really believed that I was Wimbledon level tennis player. And I can barely serve a tennis ball. So it was really a very distorted
Wow.
view of myself. And that happens. Now, one of the things I've learned in coping with bipolar disorder and taking my meds and doing a self care routine that keeps me balanced is that I can have good feelings. I can feel and do feel very frequently an overwhelming sense of joy and happiness and bliss. I feel a connection to the universe. I feel energetic. I mean, this last year has been one of tremendous productivity for me and energy, but I haven't been manic. It's like I have balanced my life so that I can pay attention to the different facets of my life. I can't do that when I'm manic. But when I'm just being healthy in my body, I can exercise moderately, eat well but moderately, have sex with my husband and not somebody else, do my work but leave space for my kids, give myself time for myself to play and meditate and just enjoy life. And
Mm.
it all becomes much more fluid and possible when I'm not manic. When I'm manic, I'm run by my extreme emotions. As
Right.
far as
And
the
what can
depression
trigger
side,
mania for
oh,
you?
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like what can trigger mania, like a upper mania, the one that you were just talking about, the manic phase. What can trigger that?
What triggered the mania?
Yeah, or
Well, for
generally
that,
what would
that I don't know what triggers mania in general. I really don't. Sometimes it seems it's seasonal, but I haven't had a an extreme manic episode like I did back in 1998 since 1998. I haven't had an extreme one like that. I've had
mm,
many blips on the radar where it's clear to me that I'm kind of getting hyped up and I need to pull myself back down. And I think one of the things I've learned over the years is how to be so self-aware and how to take my own inventory on a daily basis. I spend a lot of time in the morning. I get up at 3 or 4 in the morning and I spend 3 hours meditating, praying, writing in my journal, looking at my belly button and saying, how are you doing today? Where are you today? Who are you today? And
mm,
I take that time and I take time out during the day to meditate and to check in with myself. And I'm constantly aware of my thoughts, my feelings, my actions, because I have to be. And it may sound like a lot of work, and it is work and it isn't work. It's just become second nature to me to kind of constantly live in this state of evaluating what's going on. So when I start to fly off the handle a little bit, usually the very first thing I do is I talk to my husband and I say, it's happening. What do I need to do? Because one of the things I've learned is I can't rely on my own mind when I'm starting to get that way. I really need to
mm.
ask for help. And whether it's a psychiatrist or a counselor or a trusted friend or a husband or a wife or whatever it is, I need to speak that truth and own the fact that I am starting to go off the deep end. So,
Mm.
but I haven't been off the deep end in a long time.
Yeah.
That one
Yeah.
instance, I do believe, was triggered by my father's death, which
Right.
was a traumatic experience for me and for all my sisters. It really had a very profound impact on all five of my sisters and
Mhm.
me. And, you know, we all handled it in a different way.
Right. So how would a trigger be different leading up to a mania versus a depressive state? Would it be different triggers for those?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't feel like it's a trigger. You know, when I think of a trigger, I think of a gun going off and that explosive action happening with
Mm.
the trigger of the mania. Depression, I feel for me is more like a slow slide. It's like a landslide actually. Um, and one thing that triggers depression for me is not taking care of myself. You know, falling out of my routine of getting exercise on a regular basis, eating healthy food, getting enough
Mm.
sleep, talking to friends, and making connections during the day. For me, attending meetings, 12-step meetings, um, you know, these are all things that I really need to do on taking my medicine, taking my medication. If
Mm.
I forget to take my medicine, which I very, very, very rarely do, or I'm even for some reason I ran out of it for because I just wasn't paying attention, I can very quickly fall back into depression or mania.
Mm.
So I have to
Right.
be I'm very, very disciplined. I have to be very disciplined about my life and what I do
Mm.
and how I live my life. It's very intentional the way I live
Yeah.
my life on a daily basis.
How did this impact your family? Were your parents well aware? Were they picking up on these signs in your early years? How did it impact your family? What about your siblings as well?
Oh my gosh. My parents were clued out. They had six children of their own, and then they worked in these schools where they had 200 or more surrogate children that they were responsible for. My parents had their own issues with addictions that they were, engaged in, and so basically they were very checked out. I had an eating disorder when I was in my early teens. I've had eating disorders most of my life, but I used to keep this concoction in the refrigerator of lemon juice and soap and water, and I would drink it at every meal to make myself throw up after I ate. And one of my sisters told my parents, you know, she is sick, she needs help, she's bulimic and she's getting anorexic, and you need to do something. And my parents' reaction was, it's just a phase she's going through. And there was kind of that attitude of they had they were in denial about what was going on. As far as my sisters go, I think I was a real pain in the neck for my sisters because I was such an emotional roller coaster and I demanded so much attention, and on the other hand, I refused to show up for the family. I disassociated from the family and I held on to this kind of victim status that I had of, nobody loves me, everybody hates me, sitting in the garden eating worms. And I do feel like I had a very negative effect on my sisters when I was growing up, but I could misguided about that. I mean, we all, as we've grown up and talked about the way we perceived our childhoods and our relationships with our parents, everybody had stuff going on and everybody had issues they were dealing with, and it wasn't just me, and I wasn't the only, I wasn't the only one who was screwed up, and I also wasn't the only one who was impacted by our parents. And I think over time I've come to recognize that maybe I just wasn't that important. Maybe I wasn't doing that much damage. I mean, I did damage and I've tried to make amends for that. But I think, as you grow older and you grow hopefully wiser, you change your behavior, and it's your
Yeah.
behavior, your living amends that you make. And when you remember people's birthdays and you call and you reach out and you
Mm.
send Christmas gifts and you
Yeah, yeah.
show interest in people's lives. I think that's
Yeah.
the way that I have been able to make amends for any kind of
Mm.
harm I might have caused my siblings when we were growing up.
I'm curious though, like when you talked about the eating disorder, is it common for people that have bipolar disorder to also have eating disorders? Do those two things go hand in hand?
I have no idea, but I know that people who have addictive personalities often put, that addictive personality finds different venues to express itself. And
Interesting. Because so that means
yeah,
that when you were a lot younger, you know, it started off with the food habits, the eating habits, and then as you grew older, you got exposed to alcohol and it kind of switched out, would you say, or did you continue to have eating disorder while you also developed an alcohol
right.
addiction?
Right. I mean, I think that definitely was something that happened for me. Was as I got older and discovered alcohol took over where the food kind of left off. But I think I've always had dysmorphia, the an unrealistic or untrue appreciation for my body, if that makes any
Mm.
sense. My mother was had her own issues, and she was very, very body conscious, and she put me on my first diet when I was 7 years old. She was very, very fat phobic and just did not want any of us to be fat. She really, really messed us up in a big way with her own eating problems that she had. A number of us in my family of the six girls have had eating disorders. That's partly brought about by society and what society says you should look like and how you should come across, but it wasn't helped by my mother's actions. I remember in college when I would call her, the first question she ever asked me was, how much do you weigh? And it was always about the body. It was never about what's going on in your soul.
I wanna ask because you did talk a little bit about at least when you were in your mania, you slept around quite a fair bit, or at least you wanted to. And you mentioned as well previously to me that promiscuity was a thing that you battled with as well. Do you think that there could be a link here between your eating disorder, between your mom's expectations of like all the girls and how to maintain their body weight, and kind of this as well?
Yeah. I mean, there's that, as an addict, as a human being, I think we all have holes in our soul. We have a void that we want to fill with something. And I think we all, I mean, I speak for myself, I guess. I know I always wanted to feel loved, that I just wanted to be loved. And I didn't feel particularly loved growing up. And I didn't feel particularly trusting of my parents because they had their own addictions and they were not particularly trustworthy. So when I would have these encounters with men and boys and then later men, it was to fill that hole, to make me, as though having sex somehow could make me complete and it would make me feel full, that emptiness wouldn't be there anymore. But that absolutely backfired. That definitely was not my experience, and yet I kept seeking that same solution for the whole time that my addictions were in full swing.
Hmm.
So, I think it's all about wanting love and looking for love in the wrong places, looking for completion in the wrong places. The only place that I have found that I have felt really complete and I felt that void filled is in meditation, with my connection with the universe, with whatever you want to call it. You can call it God, you can call it source, you can call it
Hmm.
Tao, you can call it Buddha, you can call it whatever you want. When I meditate and I connect through nature, through whatever form of meditation I'm doing, then I feel full. And then I feel joy.
Right.
And it's fleeting. It doesn't last forever, but I can live with that. I realize that today. I don't have to go for the long term effect. I can live on the bits and pieces of joy that I experience in my life. And,
Hmm.
at one time I thought maybe that was blasphemous not to say that I experienced that completeness through my relationship with my husband. But my relationship with my husband is a really good relationship because we don't expect each other to complete one another. We live parallel lives. We interact. Yes, we have sex. Yes, we enjoy sex. Yes, we enjoy more than that with each other. We enjoy one another being separate human beings and coming together at times in very loving and intimate ways, and also in very silly ways and very boring and usual ways, and kind of just
Mhm.
eating soup together. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I do want to go back a little bit more, just to talk a little bit more about the bipolar experience. Can you recall any specific instances that really stand out to you when you were either in a mania or in a depressive phase of yours? Just to give our listeners a little bit more of an idea as to what that might look like and what that
yeah,
looked
I
like for
mean,
you.
one instance when we moved from Princeton, New Jersey to Michigan after of my major manic episode, during which I had spent thousands and thousands of dollars that we didn't have, and had an extramarital affair and tried to commit suicide. And it had been a train wreck, and my it had seriously impacted my husband, who has PTSD anyway. And so his life fell apart, our life fell apart, my life fell apart, and we moved to Michigan to kind of start over with a new job that he found. So while we're in this place, he was living down, at one point, he was still in Princeton with my son, who was finishing up his school year. And I was out in Michigan with our two daughters, getting this new house that we had bought, all ready for the guys to come out. And we were fixing up the basement for my son for a bedroom for him and doing this stuff. And there was the guy who was in charge of the construction was just a really nice guy. But I remember coming on to him, like flirting with him and trying to get him to sleep with me. And it was like he wasn't having any of it, but that was the residue of my mania, that whole hypersexuality thing. And I know, for me, if I ever feel that way about a man, if I ever have sexual feelings about another man aside from my husband, it is a huge red flag for me, because promiscuity was a thing that accompanied my addiction and my bipolar
Mm.
behavior. So that is something that I am very, very aware of and sensitive to.
Mm. Yeah, so it sounds like for you, kind of a lot of it really manifested in that sense, because it reminds me of some episodes that I did in the past, and many of them kind of had very different kind of effects. Some of them would start hallucinating and getting godlike images, feelings, illusions. And there were others that actually became pretty violent. And so they were kind of like pulled into the system to be weaned off of it or helped. So in your situation, it was the seductiveness. How would you come down from a mania? Would there have to be someone to take you? Were you ever taken to a ward or a psychiatric hospital? How did you come down from one of those?
I've never had to go back into a psychiatric hospital since the first time that I went, when I had that major blowout in 1998. Then I was institutionalized. But like I said, when I become aware that I'm having manic thoughts or that I'm heading in that direction, I call my psychiatrist and I tell him, whichever psychiatrist I'm using at that time, whether it's the one in Michigan or I've got one down here in North Carolina or whoever,
Mm,
I tell somebody. I mean, I have to tell the truth about what's going on. And then my medication gets adjusted. I tell my husband, and I'm able, I don't know why, I feel so blessed that I've been able to do this, to just
yeah.
pull back and say, okay, you are headed toward mania. You need to make sure you're eating right, not crap food. You need to eat 3 meals a day, healthy food. You need to get some fresh air and exercise. You need to make sure you're getting to bed on time and getting 8 hours of sleep. You need to chill out and just be, not do. And, you know, so it's a combination of reaching out for outside help from the doctors and maybe changing my medicines a little bit. And then also my self-awareness and taking care of myself. You know, I talk about in my book, How to Remodel a Life. At the end of every chapter, I have a toolkit. And in those toolkits, I have the practices that I have engaged in over the last 43 years to help me get and maintain recovery from alcoholism and bipolar disorder. And they're very practical pieces of advice, just suggestions that I take and use still today. But being honest with yourself is one of the most important things, I think, in catching mania, catching depression, not
Hmm.
not um, trying to fool yourself into thinking that you're okay, but saying honestly to yourself, you're in trouble. You need help. Go get help. You know, be
Yeah, I think that's
humble.
what it is. It's like also having that awareness. I think for a lot of people, you included as well, and the previous guest that I'd done a bipolar episode with mentioned that, it kept coming back. They lived with it. He lived with it. You lived with it for several years of your life. And the thing is, it kept coming back because the awareness was not there. You guys didn't know that, hey, look, like this is what is triggering my feeling this way, and so therefore I should act on it. Maybe the moment that you got, and I'm asking you this, the moment that you got diagnosed, or the moment that you were taken to a psychiatric hospital where there were tests being done, once you had that awareness, were you able to get the ball rolling on making the necessary changes? Would you agree?
Well, when I was taken to that psychiatric hospital, I had no idea what was wrong with me. I had no idea why I was, because I had not been diagnosed bipolar yet. Um,
Mm.
I was taken there because I was suicidal, and my husband committed me because I was a danger to myself. And it was in that experience that I met this wonderful doctor named 𝗔𝗯cie𝗂𝘁𝗃𝗲𝗄, who interviewed me, met with me, talked to me, and she gave me the diagnosis that I was bipolar at that time. You know, it was almost a tremendous relief to have a diagnosis that
Mm.
maybe was true, because I had been given diagnoses before and medicines before that hadn't worked for me. I had this one crazy quack doctor who told me that my problem was that I was addicted to chaos, and he put me on Prozac. And it did absolutely nothing for me. The depressions increased. I experienced postpartum depression while I was on Prozac. It was
Mm.
not a good experience, and it didn't do anything for me. But when 𝗔𝗯cie𝗂𝘁𝗃𝗀𝗄 said, you have bipolar disorder, and here's what we're going to do about it. And she worked with me on getting a mix of medicines that really worked. It gave me hope that there was something that I could do about my life.
Mm.
And she had a counselor that worked with her. She was a psychiatrist who did the medical, the pharmaceutical part of things. Julia did. But she
Mm.
had a counselor who worked with her, who talked to me about what path I was going to take in my life and what direction I was going to head in. And she helped me tremendously get the kind of disability insurance that I needed to get, so that I didn't have to try to hold down a job at this very fragile time in my life. So I was able to just kind of take a breather and know that, okay, you are a sick person trying to get well, and you need to give yourself time to recover. So I feel very
Mm.
fortunate that at that time I did kind of have an aha moment that, you know, you're wounded and you need to take care of yourself. You're not a bad
Mm.
person. You're not awful. You did some pretty bad things, but you are a sick person and you need to get well.
Yeah. No. I know you mentioned that for you, bipolar was something that you believe you were born with. An addictive personality can also be something someone is born with. But do you think there is a possibility that the environment also played a role in some of it?
Oh,
Like you
yes,
mentioned your
absolutely. I
parents.
don't I don't think it's just genetic. I think your environment always plays a role. And as I said, my parents were heavy drinkers and they were unpredictable because of their drinking. And what was modeled for us as kids was
Mm,
that was how you dealt with life was through, drinking every night.
yeah.
And I certainly followed in my father's footsteps in that line, along that line. I followed in his footsteps in other ways as well, which were positive ways that he really influenced my life and had a very profound and wonderful effect on my life. But
Yeah.
the addictive nature of they never said they were alcoholics or anything like that, but when you look at the track record, if you
Mm.
can say that somebody is an alcoholic, I would say that both my parents had alcoholism.
Did your siblings also develop any
Excuse me?
addictions? Did your siblings also develop any addictions or addictive behaviors?
I have one other sister who is in the 12-step program. I have a sister who has done 12-step work but doesn't go to the program anymore. I have another sister who has acknowledged that she has eating disorders and another one who hasn't acknowledged that she has eating disorders, but she does. So,
Wow.
they've
Full
all,
scale.
I think all of them have had something going on with,
Yeah.
with them.
The full range. Wow.
Yeah, the full
Okay.
range. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about like the therapy side of it, the healing side of it, the overcoming all of this, the addiction and the bipolar, living with it.
Well, what's been most instrumental in my life since I got sober when I was 26 years old, really the most instrumental thing in my life has been working the 12 steps. And, that is a program in which you accept that you are powerless. I'm powerless over alcohol. I'm powerless over food. When I don't know how to manage those things and I need help. And so
Mm,
then in the second and third steps, you go on and you develop a relationship with some power, whatever you want to call it. It has no name that you can turn to and develop a relationship with that where you go to that power for help. And whether that power is the 12-step group that you're in, a group of drunks or good orderly direction or something more spiritual or religious or whatever it is, it's really up to you. And then you do an
mm,
inventory of yourself and take a good hard look at yourself and
mm,
say, okay, here's me. This is what got me into trouble. Here's why I have resentments toward these people and places and things. Here's my part in it. Make a good house cleaning, and then you share that with somebody in the fifth step. And then
mm,
in the sixth step and the seventh step, you become ready to have those things that are obstacles that stand in your way of your recovery.
yeah.
You become ready to have them removed, and you ask that higher power to remove those things. In steps 8 and 9, you make a list of the people you've harmed, and in step 9, you make amends to all of them when you can. In step 10, you continue to take your inventory, so you keep on looking at yourself the way I've talked about, just that self
Mm,
awareness.
yeah.
In step 11, you continue to improve your conscious contact with that power that's greater than you. And in step 12, you share what you have gained through working these steps and you try to help other people and you make service a huge part of your life. It's really
Interesting.
through helping others that we get out of our own little small selves and can enjoy our
Mm,
lives. So that has become the kind of dance of my life over the past 43 years. And it's led me into a lot of places, a lot of readings that are outside of the program, books that have helped me along the way, so many books that have helped me how to stop worrying and start living is one of them. The Book of Joy is another. Sermon on the Mount, The Road Less Traveled. I could go on
Mm.
and on about all the books that have, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. I mean, there's so many books that have helped me in my recovery.
Mm.
Um, and one of the things that has been so um, wonderful about recovery is letting the recovery happen in its own time. In the beginning, I was in such a rush to be well. I wanted to be well. I wanted to be fixed. I wanted to be, you know, perfect. And I had to let
Mm.
go of that notion of perfection and just accept that, okay, you're always going to be imperfect and that's okay. You're fine just
Yeah.
the way you are, and just keep trudging the road, just keep working these steps, keep
Mm.
trying to be open to intuition and imagination and creation and your higher power, and just listen and learn and grow and change gradually. And so my spiritual recovery has been a very slow and steady process. But I have to tell you that in the last 10 years, I have to tell you this story. For the first 30 years of my sobriety, I always felt like I made recovery. I had recovery. I changed. I was becoming a different person. But it wasn't until I turned 60 in 2015, after a long bout of illness, my husband was finally given a liver transplant. He almost died of liver cancer. He was given 3 months to live, and he miraculously was given a new liver. And it was a woman's liver. And he became very sensitive and cried at the drop of a hat once he had that new liver. And I kind of liked that because he had developed this sensitivity that he didn't so much
Mm.
have before. So
Yeah.
he went on after he had this miraculous, and it was miraculous, liver transplant, and became a personal trainer. And my kids had all moved out of the house by then. I didn't have a job because I had been let go from my teaching job, which was a good thing because I became his caretaker during the last years of his illness. So I didn't have a job. I didn't have kids in the house. I didn't have a husband in the house anymore because now he had a job as a personal trainer. And I was left with nothing. And I thought to myself, what am I going to do with my life? And I asked the universe, what am I supposed to do? And the answer I heard was write. So I started writing. I went to a conference with my husband. I brought some marble notebooks, and I sat by the pool while he went to workshops, and I wrote what later became my book, When the Moon Winks, which is a woman's fiction novel that's very funny and uplifting. And I love that book. People love that
Mm.
book. So that started my career, my second career, because I'd been a teacher for a lot of years. That started my second career as a writer. And in the past 10 years, almost 10 years, I've published 3 novels. I have a new one coming out next year. I've published 2 chapbooks of poetry. I was asked to go to England to read my poetry as a guest poet at a poetry festival in Ledbury, England in 2019. I've been on TV and lots of podcasts. I'm a columnist for a magazine in the area. I don't know. I wrote a memoir, which was How to Remodel a Life. I've been hired by film companies to work on projects with them and have been a consultant, written 2 screenplays for people as a consultant. So my life has just in the past 10 years exploded. And in January of this year, I formed my own company called Lion's Tooth Literary Services, in which I help other writers in the process of writing their books from concept to completion. And I
Mm.
provide coaching and editing and ghostwriting and screenwriting and anything in between
Mm.
that you might want. So, anyway, the recovery
Absolutely amazing.
part in the last 10 years has been absolutely explosive. And my life today is so fulfilling and so rich. I think to myself, I'm turning 70 next year, but I feel like I'm 25. Feel like my life is just beginning. And I have so
Mm.
much energy. and so much enthusiasm for life. It's like, this is the best thing. This is the best. I never could have imagined this ever could be my life. I have wonderful relations with all my children, with my husband, with many friends. And, I'm involved in church, and I'm involved in exercise classes and swimming, and I don't know.
Oh,
I've
that's amazing.
got good terms with all my sisters. So life is really very, very, very rich and good right now. Very rich and good. And it's taken a long time, but it's worth the wait. It's been worth being patient and persistent.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that what you said earlier as well is like when you start to own your truth and you start to like really, really accept who you are, where you are, and your process, then everything sort of starts to kind of fall into place a little bit. You find your sort of equilibrium in the journey, in your journey, and everything that you work is working towards owning your truth in a sense. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting that feel from as well in you. And this last 10 years, it was like you opened that door to maybe sharing a part of your journey in your writing. It didn't have to be directly, but it could be in the little creative processes of a story that you're building. But that's you really living out your entire truth. And it's coming out in all of these creative ways, and it's obviously paying off. People are drawn to it, which is amazing. And I think this kind of goes to, that little message that I think is really important in this interview, and, your name being hope as well, that there is hope out there. And, just first thing, it is really for all listeners that may be going through something really difficult. It's just, acknowledge, pay a little attention to your own self, your mind, your body. And the more you kind of introspect, the more your universe is opening up to giving you the messages that you need to hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Hope, for being on Multispective. It's been such an honor to have you here. And it's just been so great to listen to your journey and everything. I'll definitely put in some links into the description for anyone that might be wanting to read your books as well. So yeah, thank you once again.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time. I love talking about myself, and it's been great, great meeting you. And I look forward to seeing the final product.
If you enjoyed the episode and would like to help support the show, please follow and subscribe. You can rate and review your feedback on any of our platforms listed in the description. I'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and open to share their life experiences with us. Thank you for showing us we're human. Also, a thank you to our team who worked so hard behind the scenes to make it happen.
𝗠𝗂𝗹𝘁𝗂𝗃, 𝗠𝘂𝗹𝘁𝗂𝗃.
The show would be nothing without you. I'm 𝗠𝗂𝗃𝗁, host and writer of the show, and you're listening to Multispective.